Janice Barlow was no ordinary girl in the quaint town of Hollow Creek. At just 19, she had an uncanny knack for noticing things others overlooked. It wasn't that she tried to meddle, she was simply curious, and in a town where everything seemed predictable, curiosity often led to secrets. Hollow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. Janice's family owned Barlow's General Store, a small hub where townsfolk gathered to gossip over penny candies and flour sacks. But Janice wasn't interested in gossip. She spent her days reading mystery novels behind the counter and sketching the view of the quiet streets through the wide, dusty window. One chilly November morning, something unusual happened. As Janice rearranged the store's stock, she noticed a man standing across the street. He was tall, cloaked in a trench coat, and his face was obscured by the shadow of his hat. He lingered outside the old, abandoned textile mill, staring at its boarded-up windows. Janice's heart raced. No one had paid attention to the mill in years. It had shut down after a fire decades ago, leaving behind only soot-stained walls and whispered rumors of hauntings. The man disappeared before she could catch a better look, but curiosity gripped her. Who was he? Why the mill? The thought of the mysterious man lingered in Janice's mind long after he vanished from view. Her shift at the store dragged on as she replayed the scene over and over. Who was he? Why was he so interested in the old mill? Hollow Creek hadn't seen a stranger in months, let alone one as unusual as him. The textile mill had been nothing more than a decaying eyesore for years, a relic of a long-forgotten era when the town thrived on industry. Now it was a hollow shell, avoided by all except the bravest teenagers on dares. Janice's mother noticed her distracted demeanor and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay, Janice?" "Fine," Janice lied, quickly stacking cans of soup. But her mind was already spinning a dozen scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. Maybe he was an undercover agent investigating a decades-old crime, or a fugitive hiding out in their sleepy town. The possibilities were endless and exhilarating. Later that night, driven by her curiosity, Janice found herself sneaking out of her house, flashlight in hand. The mill was quiet and cold, its towering silhouette against the moonlit sky making her shiver. It didn't take long to find a way inside, an old board loose enough to pull free. The sight of fresh footprints leading to a trapdoor unnerved her. But Janice wasn't easily deterred. She descended into the darkness, her breath quickening as she discovered a hidden laboratory. Then she saw him, Victor, his trench coat draped over a chair as he scribbled into a leather notebook. "Who's there?" Victor's voice was sharp, his figure tense. Janice, adrenaline buzzing, stepped forward and met his wary gaze. "I could ask you the same thing." Victor was startled, but not hostile. "You're that girl from the store. And you're that man who's been skulking around. Care to explain why you've got a secret lair under a burnt-out mill?" Victor didn't answer right away. His silence filled the room until finally, he sighed. "You wouldn't understand. Try me," she said, folding her arms. To her surprise, he did. He explained his work as a scientist, how he was studying an ancient energy source buried deep beneath Hollow Creek. It was old, powerful, and potentially catastrophic if left unchecked. Janice listened, her mind racing with questions. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but his intensity was undeniable. "I'm not leaving," she declared. "Whatever you're doing down here, it affects my town, my family. I want to help." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Help? What could you possibly do?" "Plenty," she shot back, not about to let him dismiss her. Victor leaned back against the cluttered desk, crossing his arms. His skeptical gaze lingered on Janice, sizing her up like she was an equation that didn't quite add up. "Plenty, huh? Do you even know what you've walked into?" Janice didn't flinch. "No, but I'm willing to learn. And before you say it, I'm not just some curious kid poking around where I don't belong. I care about this town, about what happens to it." Her earnestness caught Victor off guard, softening the edge of his cynicism. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence punctuated only by the faint hum of his machines. Victor finally broke the quiet with a resigned sigh. "Fine, you want to help? Then follow me." He led her to the center of the lab, where a table was covered in a chaotic array of papers, blueprints, and small, strange devices. Among them sat a cylindrical object glowing faintly with an otherworldly green light. Janice's eyes widened as she stepped closer. "What is that?" Victor hesitated, as if debating whether to trust her with the answer. That, he said, pointing to the cylinder, is the containment core. It's keeping the energy source stable, or at least it's supposed to. What do you mean, supposed to? Janice asked, her voice tinged with alarm. Victor gestured to a monitor nearby, its screen displaying a series of fluctuating numbers and graphs. The core's output has been erratic. The energy beneath us, it's alive in a way, reactive. Something's disturbing it, and if I don't figure out how to stabilize it, we're looking at more than a fire. We're looking at a meltdown. Janice's mind reeled. She wasn't a scientist, but even she could grasp the gravity of the situation. How much time do we have? Not much, Victor admitted. A week, maybe less. I've been working non-stop, but this isn't a one-person job. I need someone to help me decode these readings, test adjustments, keep an eye on the equipment. Janice took a deep breath. Okay, what do you need me to do? Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her lack of hesitation. You're serious? As serious as a meltdown, she quipped, though her hands trembled slightly as she tucked her flashlight into her coat pocket. Victor smirked despite himself. All right, then. First, you'll need to learn how to monitor the core's stability. Come here. For the next few hours, Victor guided Janice through the basics of his work. Though his explanations were often laced with technical jargon, he was patient, surprisingly so. Janice asked questions relentlessly, her curiosity unearthing details even Victor had overlooked. As the night stretched on, Janice began to see the layers beneath Victor's guarded exterior. His brusque demeanor masked a deep sense of responsibility, and his eyes, keen and sharp, betrayed a weariness she couldn't quite place. At one point she asked, "Why are you doing this? Why not just walk away and let someone else deal with it?" Victor paused, his fingers hovering over a panel of switches. Because I've seen what happens when people ignore things like this. My team, my friends, they trusted me to handle this, and I failed them. Janice's chest tightened at the raw pain in his voice. You didn't fail them, she said softly. You're still here, still trying. That counts for something. Victor didn't respond, but the faintest nod of acknowledgement broke his stoic facade. By the time Janice emerged from the mill, the first streaks of dawn painted the sky. Exhausted but exhilarated, she hurried home, her mind racing with everything she'd learned. She couldn't shake the image of the glowing core or Victor's haunted expression. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a mission. As she slipped back into her room, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her hair was tousled, her clothes dusty, but her eyes sparkled with a fire she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. Something that mattered. Little did she know, her partnership with Victor was only beginning. In the days to come, they would face challenges that tested their wits, their courage, and their trust in each other. And while the stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined, Janice knew one thing for certain. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Over the following weeks, Janice became an unexpected partner in Victor's investigation. Despite his initial reluctance, Victor found her sharp wit and bold determination invaluable. Janice, for her part, found herself drawn to his enigmatic presence. Together, they unraveled mysteries, piecing together clues about the energy source and its connection to the mill's fiery history. But their partnership wasn't without its challenges. Janice's friends and family began noticing her odd behavior. She'd disappear for hours, come home dusty and disheveled, and dodge questions about her whereabouts. Her best friend Dana confronted her one afternoon. "What's going on with you, Janice?" Dana demanded. "You're always sneaking off, and you won't tell me why." "It's nothing," Janice lied, but Dana wasn't convinced. Meanwhile, Victor grappled with his own demons. He wasn't used to trusting people, and Janice's boundless curiosity sometimes clashed with his need for caution. One night, as they examined old maps in the lab, Janice pressed him about his past. "Why do you care so much about this energy source?" she asked. Victor hesitated. "Because I've seen what it can do. I lost someone important to me because of it." Janice softened. "I'm sorry." "It's not your problem," Victor said gruffly, but his words lingered in the air. Victor's words hung between them like a ghost, filling the quiet laboratory with an unspoken weight. Janice wanted to ask more, but sensed he wouldn't give her the answers she sought. Instead, she let the moment pass, focusing on the maps in front of them. Still, Victor's confession lingered in her mind, stirring a mix of empathy and curiosity. Their partnership continued, but the tension between their differing approaches often came to a head. Victor was methodical, cautious to the point of paranoia, while Janice's instincts leaned toward action. She wasn't reckless, but her impatience sometimes got the better of her. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Janice noticed something off in one of the containment field's readings. The fluctuations on the monitor were more erratic than usual, and she pointed it out. "This doesn't look right," she said, gesturing to the jagged lines on the screen. "Shouldn't we do something?" Victor frowned, his expression unreadable. "I've been watching it. It's not critical yet." "Not critical?" Janice raised an eyebrow. "What if it gets worse?" "It won't," he replied tersely. "The system self-corrects over time." Frustrated, Janice pushed back. "And what if it doesn't? We can't just sit here hoping it fixes itself." Victor slammed his pen onto the desk, startling her. "Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? I've been working on this for years. I don't need you second-guessing me every step of the way." Janice recoiled but quickly recovered, her own frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not second-guessing you, Victor. I'm trying to help. But if you think I'm just going to sit here and follow orders without question, you've got the wrong partner." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped himself, his expression softening. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right," he admitted reluctantly. "I've been on my own for so long, I forget how to let someone else in." Janice crossed her arms but didn't push further. She could see the vulnerability behind his defenses, and it softened her anger. "I'm not here to undermine you, Victor, but we're in this together now, and you need to trust me." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Outside the lab, Janice's double life was starting to catch up with her. Dana, her best friend, wasn't the only one asking questions. Her mother had begun noticing her late nights and distracted demeanor, her brows furrowing in concern whenever Janice dodged her inquiries. "Are you in trouble?" her mother asked one morning as Janice scarfed down breakfast. "Because if you are, you can talk to me." "I'm not in trouble," Janice assured her, though the guilt of half-truths weighed heavily on her. Dana, however, wasn't so easily brushed off. One evening, she cornered Janice outside the store. "Look, I know something's going on," Dana said, her voice firm. "You've been sneaking around and you're hiding something from me. Just tell me the truth. Are you okay?" Janice hesitated, torn between loyalty to Victor and her friendship with Dana. "I can't tell you everything," she admitted, "but I promise, I'm not in danger." "That's not exactly reassuring," Dana said, crossing her arms. "If you won't tell me, I'll figure it out myself." Janice sighed, realizing she couldn't keep Dana completely in the dark. "Just trust me, okay? When the time's right, I'll explain everything." Meanwhile, Victor was battling his own ghosts. One rainy evening, as they worked side by side, he finally opened up about the person he'd lost. "Her name was Elena," he said, his voice low. "She was my colleague and my partner. We worked together on the initial discovery of the energy source. We thought we could contain it, control it, but we were wrong." Janice listened intently, her heart aching for him. "What happened?" Victor stared at the glowing core, his jaw tight. "The containment field failed during one of our tests. The energy, it consumed everything. The lab, our equipment, Elena. I barely escaped." Janice placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding. "I'm sorry, Victor. That must have been horrible." "It was," he said quietly, "and that's why I can't fail again." His confession deepened their bond, and Janice felt a new resolve to help him succeed. She wasn't just fighting for her town anymore, she was fighting for Victor too. As the weeks wore on, their uneasy partnership grew stronger, each of them learning to trust the other in ways they hadn't before. But the stakes were rising. The energy source was becoming more unstable, and the mysterious forces surrounding it seemed to be waking up. Their choices, and their ability to work together, would soon be tested in ways they never imagined. Their tenuous alliance was tested one fateful evening when they discovered a crucial lead. A journal belonging to the mill's original owner. It detailed experiments with the energy source, warning of its destructive potential. As they pored over the entries, Victor grew more intense, insisting they had to act quickly to neutralize the source. But Janice wasn't so sure. What if this energy could help people? What if we're missing something? Victor slammed the journal shut. This isn't a game, Janice. People could die. The argument escalated, their clashing perspectives threatening to unravel their partnership. Janice stormed out, frustrated by Victor's stubbornness, while Victor brooded over the growing danger. The consequences of their choices came to a head when strange phenomena began occurring in Hollow Creek. Power surges, unseasonal weather, and mysterious tremors. The townsfolk were scared, and Janice felt the weight of her secrecy. She couldn't keep lying to Dana and her family, but revealing the truth risked exposing Victor and his work. Victor paced the lab, his frustration palpable as Janice stormed out into the crisp night. The journal lay closed on the desk, its warnings ringing in his mind like a clanging alarm. He wasn't angry at Janice's questions. She had a point, after all, but at the risk she was willing to take. She didn't understand the stakes, not fully. Meanwhile, Janice walked aimlessly through the empty streets of Hollow Creek, her emotions churning. Victor's insistence on seeing the energy as a threat irritated her, but deep down, she understood his caution. Still, wasn't it worth asking if the power could be controlled, used to benefit the town, or even the world? The following days were tense. The strange phenomena grew worse. Streetlights flickered and buzzed without explanation. Animals acted erratically, birds taking flight in swarms and dogs howling at all hours. Rumors of ghostly figures near the mill began circulating. The townsfolk were growing restless, fear bubbling just below the surface. Janice knew she had to act. Keeping the truth from Dana, her family, and the people of Hollow Creek wasn't just a burden, it was becoming dangerous. One evening, as she sat in her room staring at the journal she'd smuggled out of the lab, a knock at the door startled her. "Janice," Dana's voice called softly. "Can I come in?" Janice hesitated before answering. "Yeah." Dana entered, her arms crossed. "You've been acting weird for weeks, and I've had enough. I know something's going on, and you're in the middle of it. Spill." Janice chewed her lip, torn. But as she looked at her best friend, she realized she couldn't keep lying. "Okay," she said finally, "but you have to promise me you'll listen, no matter how crazy it sounds." The next night, Janice led Dana and two other trusted friends, Tommy and Megan, to the mill. Victor wasn't expecting them, and his reaction was predictably explosive. "What the hell is this?" he barked, stepping in front of the glowing containment core. "You brought strangers into the lab?" "They're not strangers," Janice countered, standing firm. "They're my friends, and they're the only people I trust to help us." Victor's glare burned, but he didn't argue further. "Fine, but they stay out of the way." As Victor explained the situation, Dana's disbelief turned into shock and then resolve. "So what you're saying is, this energy could destroy the town if we don't handle it right?" "Exactly," Victor said grimly. "But it could also save it," Janice interjected. "If we can harness it, it could bring power to the whole region. Imagine what that would mean for Hollow Creek." Victor sighed. "You don't know what you're talking about. This isn't some science experiment you can twist into a feel-good story." "No," Dana interrupted, "but she's right that you can't just ignore the potential. You're trying to shut it down because you're scared of it, not because you've given it a real chance." Victor bristled but didn't respond. The group worked late into the night, balancing their conflicting goals. Victor's drive to neutralize the source and Janice's determination to harness it for good. It wasn't easy. Tempers flared. Mistakes were made. The breakthrough came when Tommy, usually quiet but observant, pointed out a section in the journal they'd overlooked. "It says here the original containment field wasn't meant to suppress the energy completely," he said. "It was supposed to channel it into something smaller, safer." Victor's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "Of course, a siphon." Janice leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't have to destroy the energy," Victor explained. "We can redirect it into a controlled outlet, something stable enough to contain it indefinitely." Excitement coursed through the group as they worked together to modify the equipment. Even Victor seemed lighter, his guarded demeanor softening as he began to see the possibility Janice had fought for. The plan teetered on the edge of catastrophe. The final step required activating the siphon directly over the energy source, a move that would expose them to its volatile, unpredictable power. The air in the underground lab was thick with tension, an electric charge crackling in the silence. Victor, jaw set with quiet determination, reached for the control panel. "I'll do it," he said, voice firm. Janice stepped in, her fingers wrapping around his wrist before he could go further. "No," she said, eyes locked onto his. "You don't have to do this alone." His breath hitched for the briefest moment, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. "You're stubborn," he murmured, his lips twitching into the ghost of a smile. "I've been told," she shot back, unwavering. With a steadying breath, they positioned themselves over the core, its pulsating glow casting eerie shadows across the cavernous space. The machinery groaned under the weight of the rising energy, warning lights flickering like an alarm screaming in silence. The ground trembled beneath them, and for one heart-stopping moment, Janice swore she could feel the power trying to consume them, pulling, twisting, roaring like a beast waking from its slumber. Victor's fingers flew across the controls, his face illuminated in the greenish haze of the unstable core. Sparks exploded from a nearby console, casting bursts of white-hot light into the air. The containment field wavered, buckling under the force. "Now, Janice," Victor barked. Together they reached for the final lever, their hands moving in sync as they pulled it down. The siphon roared to life with a deafening hum, energy swirling violently around them. Janice squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for impact. And then, silence. The tremors stopped. The air, once suffocating with heat and power, cooled. When she opened her eyes, the wild glow of the core had softened into a steady, controlled stream. The siphon had held. They had done it. Victor let out a slow, disbelieving breath, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Janice let out a nervous laugh, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Wow, we did it," she whispered. "That was close," Victor finished for her. They turned to face each other, exhaustion written in their expressions, but something else too. Something unspoken. Relief, triumph, trust. The impossible had become reality, and together they had changed the fate of Hollow Creek forever. The operation wasn't without its risks, but their combined efforts paid off. The energy source was stabilized, and Hollow Creek returned to its quiet, unassuming life. Janice and Victor's bond deepened in the aftermath, their differences transforming into mutual respect. Victor decided to stay in Hollow Creek, his work now supported by the people he once distrusted. As for Janice, she found a purpose far greater than she ever imagined, proving that even a curious girl from a small town could change the world. And though their journey had been fraught with challenges, it was the unexpected twists, the conflicts, the reconciliations, and the unlikely friendships that defined their story. With the energy source stabilized, the tension that had loomed over Hollow Creek finally lifted. The townsfolk, though unaware of the full extent of what had happened beneath their feet, celebrated the sudden return of calm. The strange weather patterns ceased, the tremors subsided, and the town seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. For Victor, life in Hollow Creek took on a new, surprising rhythm. Where he had once been a lone wanderer, constantly on edge, he now found himself part of a community. Janice insisted he come to dinner with her family one evening, a gesture he resisted at first. "Your family barely knows me," he said, brushing imaginary lint off his ever-present trench coat. "They'll like you," Janice replied with a smirk. "Or at least tolerate you. It's a small-town thing." To his surprise, the dinner wasn't as awkward as he had feared. Janice's parents were warm and welcoming, albeit slightly baffled by his dry humor. Dana, who had joined them as well, kept shooting Victor knowing glances, as if silently reminding him of the ragtag group effort that had saved the town. By the end of the night, Victor found himself laughing, a sound so rare it startled even him. Janice, meanwhile, found herself transformed by the experience. She had always dreamed of something bigger, but she hadn't realized that her bigger didn't mean leaving Hollow Creek behind. It meant building something meaningful within it. Working with Victor gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was searching for. Their partnership evolved into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared memories of near disasters. Victor often teased her about her impulsiveness, while she poked fun at his overly cautious nature. But beneath the banter was an unshakable bond, a trust forged through fire. And as the days stretched into weeks, the town's quiet life resumed. But for Janice and Victor, it was anything but ordinary. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, proving that even the most unlikely friendships can light the way to extraordinary possibilities. Hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for listening. Help us out by subscribing to our channel, Green Tea Tales.